and you can see NetTerrain in action. And so let's do some polling questions. Let's launch the poller. What do you currently use to document and map your network? You can choose more than one. It's my favorite sort of answers, multiple choice. It's what got me through my schooling days for sure. Spreadsheet Visio combo, very nice. And then other, I'm always curious what other is. I assume other is probably a napkin or something like that. Maybe some random sheets of paper lying around. Maybe something crazy like a chalkboard. That's pretty old school. Coworker who seems to know everything. That's, yeah. 25% of respondents. That's usually about right. There's a chat here. Ooh, NetViz, yeah, NetViz and NetTerrain, yeah. Can you switch to presentation mode? Presentation mode. I assume you mean for my, for this. I don't know. I'm sort of sharing my whole screen. Maybe it's getting cut off or something. I'm not gonna be in the PowerPoint for long, so I wouldn't worry too much about the PowerPoint if that's the issue. I'm not really gonna show the PowerPoint. Anyway, so that was one of the polling questions. So I'm gonna end the poll. So spreadsheets was the big winner. And then Visio, of course, nothing. Nobody's doing nothing. So that's surprising. Usually there's somebody doing nothing. And then other, as I said, I wonder what other is. End. Okay, so I'll show. Let me see. I got one more chat here. Ooh, it's okay. Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry, Jerry. I don't know if I'm supposed to say people's names. Polling question number 2. We usually do 2 polls right off the bat. Let's see what number 2 is. What other data sources you want to bring in besides ServiceNow? So are there other ones out there you're thinking about besides ServiceNow? Spectrum, VMware, AWS, SolarWinds, other or none? I have to. Yeah, thank you, Fred. Yes, I have to press the button to launch the polling question. That's always helpful, right? You can see I'm a master of the webinar. Spectrum, interesting. I don't hear a lot about Spectrum anymore. Maybe you'll hear more about them now that there have been issues with some of the other tools out there with security. I don't know. VMware. Oh, okay. VMware. That's nice. SolarWinds. Ooh, yes, SolarWinds. That's the thing I was thinking of. Other and none. Yeah, everybody's got SolarWinds, right? I guess that's why they were sort of a prime candidate or target for being hacked. So anyway, good stuff. So yeah, it just shows there's other sort of interest out there in the world besides, something like ServiceNow or whatever it is. So, all right. So polling question. We talked about the polling question. Yeah, ServiceNow. We're just going to talk about ServiceNow. That's pretty much it. So we're going to see it in action. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat or there's like a question Q&A section. I guess you can go in there and post questions there. It doesn't matter. I'll find it one way or another. So sales honcho, Fred Coe, you can reach out to him if you have, how much is this? You want to schedule a demo with a sales engineer, that kind of thing. You can sign up for NetTerrain. If you want to try it out, you can go to our cloud instance, NetTerrain.us, and sign up there. It's a 14-day trial, so I wouldn't sign up unless you really have time to play around with it, because otherwise it times out and you have to sign up again. So you're better off just waiting until you're sure you have some time. But there's our phone number and all that good stuff. So moving on, let me bring up, let me find my NetTerrain instance here. Let me minimize that. I'm just going to pause for a second so I can actually find where I'm supposed to be. Not that one. Here we go. Back to project. All right, let me resume my share here. Top level. Okay. So, let's say you want to do some network documentation and I'm going to drag an object out. And this is where most people start with network documentation, right? Blank piece of paper or a blank Visio drawing or whatever it is. So, you know, fundamentally you ask yourself, okay, I want to document X, Y, and Z, this part of the network or some process or some diagram that gives me an overview of some server and the connections and firewall rules and things like that. I don't know, just whatever it is you're trying to kind of show. Well, a blank piece of paper is a little intimidating because you have to fill it up with things. Now, if you are knowledgeable about your network, which a lot of you I'm sure are, you can just start to drag and drop objects and then, you know, bring in connections of how things connect together and create, you know, nice logical drawings and that sort of thing, right? So that's usually pretty easy. But if you want something a little more detailed, you want to show maybe different locations where you have you know, equipment or campuses or whatever it is, whatever you're into. So here's like a university and you want to show the university and maybe some pictures and primary data center cabinets or wiring closet cabinets and so on. That's a little more complicated because now you're talking about devices and you may want to show actual physical connections to ports, that sort of thing, right? So you want to be able to create all that. The best way, I mean, ideally you press a button, call it the magic red button, and it fills up the diagrams and creates diagrams and does all that stuff for you. So that's the automation side, right? That's probably partly why you're here. So there is no press a button and your network's just magically totally discovered. I mean, there's some tools out there that probably get pretty close. And we try and do a pretty good job of it. And there's tools that probably do an even better job of it. But, you know, that usually comes with a certain cost as well, right? So you want, you know, everybody's going to have to weigh that, you know. But we try and give you a pretty good mix of, hey, let's go do discovery or take advantage of data that you have to help you automate this network documentation process. So if we look at one of our tools, which is the collector, the collector has connectors. And connectors are the things that we use to actually to communicate with some data set or do discovery. So I'm kind of giving you the high level overview here where you have NetTerrain, which is where you create your diagrams and drawings and such. So inside NetTerrain, you're going to create your hierarchies and your buildings and your floor plans and rooms and all those things. So we do that in NetTerrain. That's our drawing tool. So just like you might use Visio today, that's your drawing tool. You go into Visio, you open it up and you drag stencils in and so on. We kind of have the same concept, except we usually have, you know, a little bit more capability there if you're talking about true network documentation. So, and one of those capabilities is the automation side of the house. So, and so then I get back to this again, the collector. So the collector allows us to do a connection to a data source and pull data in. So for instance, I'll focus on ServiceNow for a second. If I go over to the right, there's a configuration area where you put in a user and password and an endpoint, you test your connection, and then it actually discovers data for you. Sorry about noise. So it'll go out and do a discover information. Well, what does it discover? Well, currently our ServiceNow connector basically looks for this data. It would look for this data in your ServiceNow. It doesn't mean you have all this data. In my case, I don't. I just have a couple subsets of data, so you're not really going to see it. But from the standpoint of what you're going to look for, like applications, circuits, CMDB information, computer room, hardware, firewalls, phones, outlets, servers, warranty information, all these things can come across as data points that you can bring into your network documentation. The stuff that you don't need to use or want to use or care about in your network documentation, don't bring it across. I wouldn't do that. I would just bring across the things that make sense. Like maybe it's a device, or maybe it's people, or maybe it's whatever, it doesn't matter. But you can come in here and configure that. You can do what's called a type mapping, where you're mapping it to an object type in NetTerrain as well. But this is all driven by the APIs of, in this case, ServiceNow. So ServiceNow has extensive API library, as most companies seem to do anymore. Not everybody, but a lot. Like we ourselves have an extensive API, so you can programmatically control NetTerrain the way you want to in order to bring or create diagrams or documentation, or to pull data out of our tool and put it in another tool. So I have a lot of customers that programmatically create network documentation, place objects on a diagram, create all the connections and links, and show really nice diagrams. And they're all generated basically on the fly when somebody needs to see a network or a network drawing. And they're using our APIs to programmatically do that. Now, in this case, that's not quite as detailed as what's happening here. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, use the APIs from ServiceNow and go out and find me the data on, in this case, these objects. Now, that doesn't mean that this is all you can go and discover. It means that that's what we've sort of cooked in and built in right now. But in fact, this is really a big giant XML file, and we can add additional things to this very easily. And you can bring in more data. Now, you could try and do that yourself, and you might be able to get that working right. Usually we just say, hey, what do you want? We'll kind of work with you on what else you might be missing that you want to bring in, or how you might want it configured, or the data points, and so on. So what happens is you go out and you do a scan of your network. At the top, there's a scan. You can also set up a discovery, so it scans on a regular basis. Go out and every 24 hours, find me new data, or update the data that I have for objects and bring data across. So in my case, I have sort of a small sample set because this is actually coming from a ServiceNow test instance that you can set up with ServiceNow. So there's not a ton of data in here, and I've pushed some of it through, like the users I think I pushed in, but I didn't push everything in. But the point of this is really kind of give you an overview of what does this mean? What am I getting? What am I grabbing? Well, again, I'm getting things like hardware. I've got 900 hardware objects in here from different manufacturers and models. I've got a couple IP router servers, full stock room. These are different actual stock rooms. So this is actually more physical location type things. And then we've got the users brief over here as well. So again, it's showing you the data. The data gets pulled into this thing called the NetTerrain. Again, the NetTerrain collector. Using these different connectors. So now, this just to kind of give you some thoughts on the connector, like where do you run this tool from? This thing. This software that has all these connectors. Well, what's nice about this is portable in that you can place it on your desktop, or you can put it on the server at different locations and have it do discovery, and then take that discovery and data and point it at your NetTerrain server and have it push the data to that server. And that's using our APIs, in fact, but it's doing it over, SSL, if you have SSL set up for your NetTerrain server. So in my case, I can do a discovery here, wherever this collector is installed, and then I can push that data into wherever my NetTerrain server resides or lives. It doesn't matter. So, and you can have multiple collectors sort of running around the world. I've got a customer that runs collectors in all different parts of the world because they have all these different locations, and they don't want to necessarily have a discovery from one central location. So they'll discover in different areas, set up different schedules, and then that data in turn gets pushed into their NetTerrain server. So it's a pretty good way you can set things up. Do you have to do it that way? No, it's up to you. So we try and keep it somewhat configurable as well. So the data itself, you discover it, and then the data can be pushed into a NetTerrain server. If for some reason you're doing a discovery network and you can't get to the NetTerrain server, you can't actually push the data over a URL, that's okay too. You can in fact save the data locally and then take that data and then move it somewhere and then push it to the NetTerrain server when it's available to you. So there's sort of all different ways of doing that sort of thing. So what happens is the data gets pushed into NetTerrain here, delete this, and then you get data into your project. And where it shows up, it can show up at the top level. This is the top level of the project. It could show up in a specific bucket. Like, for instance, you may put it into like WMI goes into a WMI bucket, vCenter goes into vCenter, SolarWinds into SolarWinds, and so on. I think I have mine in, I think it's this one. I just didn't move it down. ServiceNow. So these are some of the data points that I push through, like users. I brought the users across. And there was a lot, so this will take a second to load up. But what's nice is once you've done this discovery, you've discovered data, whatever that data happens to be, whether it's a server or a switch or a router, or in this case, a person. I just wanted to do something other than switches and routers because I'm always talking about those things. But let's say you discover a person in this data set, the ServiceNow, and you need to show that this person, is in charge of a server or something. Well, you can take the data that you've discovered and you can either cut it and move it. I can move this person to a different drawing. I can also do what we call aliasing, where I'm actually making a copy, but it's an equal to copy of what we call the master object, or the object that's the original, right? So you can do those types of things. But going back to the collector, so you can create a connection to something like ServiceNow, or as was mentioned in the call, what other types of things can you connect to or bring data from, and so on. Well, again, if it's something like vCenter, then maybe you're doing a vCenter discovery and you're discovering all the hosts, and you're going to discover all the servers that are attached to the hosts. So you have a host, and then you got all the images that are running on that host. And if you're using something like vMotion, it'll show, sort of things moving back and forth into the different hosts, and so on. If it's, SNMP, that's just basically straight up doing a discovery. So you're not really pulling data from a system as much as you're interfacing with devices and you're pulling data. But that's a little off topic, but it falls into the same place. I mean, if you're looking to bring data from a data source, whether it's ServiceNow or SolarWinds or whatever, check out our collector, try it out. It's really easy. You don't even have to install NetTerrain. You can just literally download the collector, test it, do a discovery, see what kind of data you get, configure it, and then when you're ready, you can push data into a NetTerrain instance. If you do want to try it out, you should reach out to us. Again, netterrain.us, you can sign up, but also you can download the collector from there, push the data into that instance, and test things out. But that's how you really find out how these things kind of work for you. But if you got any questions, let me know. We're out of time. I just want to leave a couple minutes for questions. If there's no questions, we're good at this point. Just let me know. But if you do have questions, you can throw them into the Q&A area, and I will try to answer them as best I can. I do want to thank you for the polling questions. Those are always fun to throw out there and see what people are doing. It's pretty straight. That's pretty common though. Excel and Visio. That's what a lot of folks use. Looks like I got a question here. Cloud-based solution. Only if you want it to be. We have both. We have cloud offering where we host it for you. We can do our typical cloud. You can have hosted where it's a standalone server in the cloud, and also you can purchase the software installed in your own environment, whether that's the cloud or internal storage, internal servers. That's up to you, but there's really nothing that, you can, again, tailor it to what you need. Can you update the import regularly? No, it's updatable. You can import that data from the collector. You can schedule it where it comes in on a regular basis, every 24 hours or every hour or whatever makes sense for what you're trying to do. There is also, that collector has, you can do status change updates. You can look for status changes and actually like change the appearance of an object or have it flash and that kind of thing. So yeah, ServiceNow write back. If you want to update data from NetTerrain, on some of these things you can write back. That's not out of the box. That's usually something we ask you before we do it, enable it. It's usually pretty easy to enable because it's all API based, but you have to make sure that writing back is configured correctly because you're talking about putting data into their system. So you want to make sure one, you're using the right API calls and of course permission levels for the user accounts that you're going to use and things like that. So that you can do for sure. It's just we want to know the just the requirements and exactly what you want to do. It's typically not like an extra cost or anything for that. It's just making sure we set it up correctly for you. Let's include the price. Yeah. So no, most most things like that, collectors are typically not, we don't charge for, assuming they're pretty standard as far as the APIs and what they offer and what's available. Typically, you know, of course there's outliers, right? There'd be some system out there with bad APIs or strange APIs or something like that. Then yeah, we have to charge because there's extra work or a lot of programmatic things we might have to do. But if you know, ServiceNow, these big companies, ServiceNow, vCenter, VMware, you know, AWS, Azure, you know, they want you to use the APIs, and you know, they try and make it pretty easy anymore to get data out of their systems, which is really pretty cool. So it helps you do bigger, you know, more integrations that are more automated as well. So hopefully, anyway, so hopefully that's helpful. Again, reach out to us if you got questions, you want to try things out. It's really easy to try the collector. I mean, as long as you have a Windows machine. Again, you don't even need NetTerrain installed. Download the collector, sign up. I mean, the process typically is you sign up in NetTerrain US, you get an account, you download the collector, you set your collector up locally, you know, install it, put in your IP addresses or API credentials for the system you want to pull data from. You pull the data, you press the button to push, pushes it back into NetTerrain, and now you've got data. And then from there, it's, you know, depending on how you want to do the drawings. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. If you got more questions, of course, reach out to us. Happy to help you out. So you guys have a great rest of the day.